Thank you. Thank you very much for the very kind introduction, Prem. And it's absolutely no pressure at all. Following the footsteps of James that have spoken in the last 3 days, you've set up the bar really high for me. But hopefully, at least I'll be able to crawl underneath it, if not completely fail. So thank you very much for having me today, and it's a pleasure to be on this forum. I've been enjoying a lot of sessions in the last 3 days. It's been fantastically organized. Hats off to you and your team. And without much ado, I want to talk about a very important thing, which is behavioral psychology. Behavioral psychology is at the root of every single financial decision that we make, period. And the idea behind behavioral psychology is to figure out how can we get better at making financial decisions, and how can we get better at using psychological factors that help us make the right financial decisions. So I want to talk about something called My 3B. My 3B is nothing but the biases, behaviors, and blind spots that we need to be aware of in order to actually make better financial decisions. Before we get there, let's look at how we process information. Our brain is such a fantastically well-made machine that processes information such beautifully that we hardly recognize it. Let's play a small game. I know that this is a virtual conference, so I don't know, obviously people won't be able to respond directly, but you can respond at home, with a short piece of paper. On the next slide, I'm going to show you a couple of word combinations, letter combinations. And just like in say 5 seconds, I want you to tell me which combination of letters, basically produces the most number of words. Yeah. So does the first set of letters produce the most number of words, or the second set of letters produce the most number of words? Just 5 seconds, right? Okay, I think that's more than enough time. Almost 100% of people in our research rightly pointed that the second set of letters produces the most number of words compared to the first one. Now think about this for a second. Your brain has literally short-circuited hundreds of thousands of combinations and basically just jumped up saying that the second set of letters actually produces more words because you see familiar vowels. Even though you cannot exactly pinpoint the reason in 2-3 seconds, but you know that that's the right answer. Yeah, but let's just keep it on the side. Again, I'm going to be asking 3 simple questions. I just want you to take literally 3 to 4 seconds and then come up with the first answer that comes to your mind. You can just keep a piece of paper and just write next to it, and then we'll see how you do, right? So here, let's assume that a bat and a ball cost 110 rupees in total. And the bat costs 100 rupees more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Just 3 seconds, whatever the number comes to your mind, just write it down, okay? Let's move to the next question. In this time, let's assume that we have a machine that actually produces bats. Now, if it takes 5 machines, 5 minutes to make 5 bats, how long would it take 100 machines to make 100 bats? Just again, 2 to 3 seconds, write down your answer. And the last one, I promise this is the end of questions now, with some more fun things to follow a little later. Let's assume that we have a lake where there's a patch of lilies, and the lilies double in size every single day. Imagine that it takes 48 days for the entire patch to be covered with lilies. Yeah. Now, how long would it take for the patch to cover half of the lake? Yeah. Write your answer, keep a note, 3 seconds, done. Now, in our research, we found that between 65 to 70% of the people had these 3 answers, 10 rupees, 100 minutes, 24 days. Yeah. But the correct answers are actually 5 rupees, 5 minutes, and 47 minutes. Yeah. So now that's the difference between intuitive answers and correct answers. Intuitive answers are what seem right to you, but are not correct. But they seem really, really they seem to make sense at that point in time. Yeah. Now, let's see why this is happening. We have our brain has 2 different ways of processing information. There's something called system 1 and system 2. This was actually made phenomenally interesting, and it was actually introduced by Daniel Kahneman, who's literally considered probably the godfather of the field of behavioral economics. And this was one of his way that he dealt with the processing information part of our brain. So system 1, it's fast, it's automatic, it's instinctive, it's emotional. So system one decision making happens at the spur of the moment. Yeah. So to give you a very simple example, let's assume it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon and you're dieting, but then I kind of like say, hey, you know what? Do you want to have a banana for snack or a nice piping hot samosa? Yeah. Now, 95% of people out there, if you were like me, would obviously choose for the samosa because that's our system one processing. It's fast, it's automatic, it's emotional, it just wants instant gratification. System two is slow, effortful, deliberate, and logical. So that's the long-term thinker. So think of system one as short-term and system two as long-term. And most of the problems in our life arise because of the gap between system one and system two. Instead of using system two, oftentimes we end up using system one. And again, I'll show you an example. So if I say, read this text, 2 seconds, you read it. Ask you what is 2 plus 2, half a second, the answer is 4. That's your system one that's working. Yeah. But now if I say that multiply 17 times 24. Yeah? So you need to have a piece of paper, you need to do your calculations, that takes time. If I say count the vowels in this particular sentence, that's going to take you a little bit of time, just like 5 seconds, 10 seconds, but it's going to take you time. Now, the most important thing to understand is how the system one and system two interact in our daily life to push us to take certain decisions. Now, here's a fun question. Just make a note of it again. Imagine that you're 1 rupees 10 lakhs in lottery. Yeah. So just think about like 10, 15 seconds on how you'd spend it, whether you go on a holiday or buy a car or spend it on something else, whatever. Just think about that for a few seconds, right? Now, I'll change the frame of reference. Yeah. Imagine that you have saved 10 lakhs over a period of 3 years. Yeah. You've really worked night and day, saved the money, put it in a bank account. It's always safe. Now you've got 10 lakhs. How would you spend it now? Yeah. If you think about this a little carefully, you will see that the way you spend the money in this situation is different from the way you spend the money in this situation. Literally 86% of our respondents said that they had a different set of like spending plans for the first option versus the second option. Yeah. And when asked why, they were saying that, oh, in the first one, I just got it for free. And in the second one, I worked for it. But the important thing to understand here is 10 lakh rupees is 10 lakh rupees. It doesn't matter what the source of the money is. If you are a rational, logical person, which is what traditional finance assumes you to be, then you have to focus on how best to use the 10 lakhs and not be worried about what the source of the 10 lakhs is. Just because you earn the money in a very hard way over 3 years, 10 lakhs is not going to buy you more. And just because you got an easy lottery a couple of days back doesn't mean that 10 lakhs is going to buy you anything less. So 10 lakhs is 10 lakhs, right? So why do we behave irrationally? From a behavioral economics perspective, and even from a traditional finance perspective, this is considered as an irrational behavior, right? But according to me, it's not irrational. It's kind of normal behavior. And why is that? Because of 3 factors. We have something called cognitive limitations, which means we have only a certain amount of processing power in our brain. Yeah? We don't have an infinite capacity to look at all kinds of permutations and combinations and look at everything. Number 2, we have imperfect information, which means all the information that we have today and all the information that we have today to make a decision for the next 3 months, for the next 6 months, for the next 1 year is imperfect because they can change at any point in time. So we just don't know how the information is going to change, what new factors will come in, what new variables will come. Number 3, we have time constraints. We already have like 150 things to do in a day. We have to do our groceries, we have to like go to office, we have to like do work at home and then watch some shows and talk to friends, spend time with family. So there's a lot of time constraint. And then we don't have like 5-6 hours to think through deeply and make a decision. Because of these 3 factors, what we end up doing is we end up taking mental shortcuts. Now, there's an upside to mental shortcuts. So for example, imagine our ancestors about 500 or 1,000 years before, right? Imagine they were like hunting or they were in a forest or something, and suddenly they're faced with a lion. Now, they just have 2 choices, fight or flight, right? They can't just stand and think, what if I throw my spear at a degree of 45 degrees, will the projectile have enough momentum to pierce the heart of the, of the lion? What velocity should I run at and what should my acceleration be? No, it's just part of the movement. They either fight it or, get out of the place, right? Now, imagine how this is transferred in today's world. If you have about, say, 15 to 20 pieces of clothing, right? Like 5 shirts, 5 pants, 2 belts, like 2 ties and whatever, right? If you look at the permutations and combinations in the order that you can wear them, there's actually literally hundreds of thousands of permutations and combinations. But what we do is we make a very quick decision. We say, I'll go with this one, I'll go with this one. In probably less than a minute, we have made our selection. If every single time we had to do this permutations and combination, obviously our brain would just freeze and we would probably not even get anything done. Which is why you had a lot of very successful entrepreneurs like Zuckerberg and previously Steve Jobs, who just wear the same dress every single day because it reduced the amount of time that they had to make decisions. And this is extremely important because as part of evolutionary psychology, what our brain is doing is by taking these mental shortcuts, it is conserving time, energy, and effort. So we can focus on the more important things in life. Yeah, so this is a very good thing that our brain is doing, and it's very, very good at that. But the issue is when this gets transferred to the financial markets. Now think about this for a second. The human brain has been under evolution for hundreds of thousands of years, whereas the financial markets have been around, give or take 50, 60 years, in more recent times. And so what ends up happening is our brain is not wired to respond to financial markets separately or any differently than we do with life, which is why some of the downsides are holding on to losers, having concentrated portfolios, overtrading, investing in more recognizable names, reacting impulsively to recent events, and the list goes on and on and on. Yeah. Now these are the downside of mental shortcuts. The point is then, how do we get better at it? How can we look at what we have in terms of what our biases are, what our behaviors are, and what our blind spots are that have an immediate impact on our investing, right? So we came up with this My3B framework. And like Dr. Crosby mentioned yesterday, there are more than 200 cognitive biases, emotional biases, behavioral biases that have been identified by the literature, academic literature and the academic world. Obviously, that's a lot. What we have done is we have looked at some foundational ones on top of which everything else stands. So if you understand your foundational ones and work with it, you are more likely to succeed than having not worked on it. So the 3 key ones are biases. Now, what are biases? Biases are at the level of your subconscious mind. So think about this. There's a subconscious mind, there's a conscious mind, and then there's a real world. Yeah. So biases are literally at your subconscious mind. They impact how you make financial decisions. So one thing that we have picked is overconfidence, which is again something that Dr. Crosby talked about yesterday. The second is behaviors, which comes to our conscious mind. And this is the preferences or the choices that we make. Yeah. So in this particular one, we have picked loss aversion. So loss aversion really dictates a lot of the decisions that you make. And the third is what we call as a blind spot. This is the gap between what people think they know and what they really know. And we have put in financial mastery there because, look, all of us have different jobs to do, we have different roles to do, so we can't be expected to be financial experts, right? That's why we go to financial advisors, because they are the experts, and there's no harm in admitting that my expertise is limited in this area. So the more you understand that, the better off you are going to the right resources to make the right decisions, yeah? So if I were to look at this, and I'll tell you why these 3 are important. We can actually pick all these 3. And what we have done at Syntoniq is we have come up with investment personality profiles. And these investment personality profiles actually help you understand who you are, how you make decisions, and why you make the decisions that you make, and how you can get better at it. Now, very importantly, before we go to the practical tips, I just want to spend literally like 2 more minutes on these 3 particular topics, right? So overconfidence is something about, it talks about how we feel we know a lot more than what we know. And when we have high overconfidence, research has shown that we end up having concentrated portfolios. We end up doing more trading. We end up doing more transactions because we are sure that we'll get it right. And overconfidence, again, like a lot of other people have mentioned, is very different between men and women. Men are generally more overconfident than women, unfortunately. And so the point is, once you understand your level of overconfidence, you can basically get better at managing it. And bear in mind, this is not something that you consciously make. Yeah, overconfidence is part of almost like your DNA. So once you become aware of it, you can actually get better at it. Loss aversion is where losses hurt you more than gains of similar nature, right? Because of which, what ends up happening is you end up making different decision if you're faced with a 5,000 rupee loss versus a 5,000 rupee gain, even though in terms of monetary value, they are the same, but in terms of the impact it has on you, it's very different. And financial mastery, like I explained, is your expertise in the topic. Yeah. So what we will do is like now we'll go to look at practical tips as to how you can get better at investing. The first is there are some key behavioral attitudes that we need to adopt, which is life is non-deterministic, which basically means that what we think will happen for sure or we expect to happen may not happen. So there's all kinds of probabilities. What you think may not come to pass. Be actively open-minded, which means that be ready to change your initial hypothesis. If you've made a particular plan that you want to buy something, think about it, talk to people, get conflicting information, open up your mind and just think about it, which is what the next is, need for cognition. That is, you need to understand that you need to spend a little bit more time in making decisions and you don't need to rush into it. Reflective updates is when you look at new information as it's coming in, think about it a little bit carefully. Caution, obviously, if something is too good to be true, then it probably is. So, be careful. Which basically brings to the point that we need to be humble. We need to be aware that we could go wrong, and that's very important to know. Yeah. The second thing I would suggest is decision journaling. And this is extremely important because a lot of research has shown that, let's assume that we made a particular decision 6 months ago. Yeah, saying that we want to buy this particular stock or this particular mutual fund or this particular NFO or whatever that is, right? 6 months have gone by. It probably has turned out really well, but probably the decision was not great. But now if you think about why did I make that choice? Why did I do that? If you think about that in the past, your memory will not pick the exact reasons. It will just selectively reconstruct. So which is where memory is not a great tool to like think about things. So if you actually journal down, so if you basically maintain an investment journal and write your points, why am I taking this particular action today? Just write it down. Keep a note of it, keep track of it. 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, 8 months later, if you want to take a look at it, take a look at it. And see if those reasons were the reasons why the decision turned out to be well, or if the decision turned out to be bad. If the decisions turn out to be bad, now you can reframe these negative outcomes as learning opportunities. Yeah, now this gives you a way to learn and improve your decision-making skills. And over time, journaling has shown to be extremely important when it comes to improving financial relations. And the third and the last one is forging, which is you basically have to externalize your thoughts. And to externalize your thoughts, it's always helpful to have somebody, whether that's a financial advisor or your friend, or they don't even have to be like an expert actually. You just need to talk about why are you doing this? And what's the thought behind that? While talking about it loudly, you will actually end up coming up with some pretty good ideas as to why that may not be the right thing to do. And it's always good to have, if you have the other person to ask you questions that are probing and listen to you non-judgmentally, this also helps you with continual training and education. So to put this all together, right, we basically have, like I said, developed all this investor personality profile. And just because Cafemutual has been really kind to invite me for this particular session, we have decided to open this up for the viewing audience. If you go to ipp.syntoniq.com, it will take you to our partners website where you can actually take this investor personality profile to see who you are and what your biases are, what your behaviors are, what your blind spots are, to kind of make it much more practical for you. Thank you very much for your time today, and thank you, Prem and Cafemutual team for having me. But this is fantastic. If you have any questions, please go for it.
Yeah. So, Prasad, that was a terrific presentation. I wanted you to actually take us through, one slide in more detail.
Sure. Please.
This was the one where you described the profiles, investor types rather,
Right.
seeker,
Yes.
adventurer.
Yes. Yes.
If you could let us know, and we'll see if there's, yeah, we can
Absolutely.
probably know ourselves a little better with this.
Absolutely. So there are 8 different personas that we came up with, Prem, in our research. And this research is an outcome of more than 3 years of work with a team of 5 PhDs, and there's a lot of work that has gone into it. And the idea behind these personas is it helps you understand how you process information. So very, very simply, right? It's the difference between a seeker and an analyzer. An analyzer is somebody who needs a lot of information to make decisions. Yeah? They will keep on continuing in the analysis paralysis mode. That's the downside, right? Whereas the seeker is not very, is not an expert in the field of finance. So they will go and seek somebody who knows that better, and then basically take help and get some understanding from them to see how to go with their financial portfolios and plan. Similarly, an explorer is somebody who's ready to look at like new products, new markets, new things that they've not looked at before. Versus a protector is somebody who's not very open to new ideas. They want to just stick around with what they already know and what they already have. And these 8 personas are what we actually deliver when you take this particular assessment at ipp.syntoniq.com, you will get to find which persona you are, and then what are the factors that influence your investing process and how you can actually get better at it.
Yeah, hello, Prasad?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, okay. And in terms of, you had some very practical tips on, things like journaling and all that.
Yeah.
Really helps. Can you make a couple of more suggestions on how we can be better investors?
Actually, yes. So the first and the most important thing is always keep a gap between your decision and the implementation of that decision. Right?
Okay.
That is very, very important.
Yeah, in fact, I think this is what yesterday Daniel Crosby
Correct.
made. He gave the example of thinking in different languages.
Correct, exactly.
Slows down the process of, yeah.
Correct, exactly. Fantastic one, exactly. So that is very important. Okay. Number 2, you have to understand that there's something called confirmation bias, which is we always like to stick to our original ideas. In fact, unfortunately, a lot of times when you go and seek more information, your brain is selectively only giving you information that you already like. Yeah. So you have to actively go and look at information or seek information that conflicts with your initial hypothesis. So for example, let's assume that you're very bullish about a particular sector or a particular company or even the stock market. You have to actually go and find or Google information saying that why is this a bad idea? Or if let's assume that you like XYZ company or XYZ fund or whatever that is. Google why XYZ company is bad, or investing in it, not the company itself, why investing in the XYZ company is bad or XYZ mutual fund is bad. So go and look for conflicting pieces of information. But the most important thing, Prem, number 3 is we have to always think about this in your own life, right? When your friend is faced with a particular set of problems, okay, you can very clearly identify and console them and give them the right kind of counsel and tell them what to do. But if you have the same problem in life, you will not be able to see it so clearly because it's so close to you, right? So it's always better to have somebody like a professional or at least a friend or somebody. So it puts a gap between you and your decision-making process. It can be an app, it can be somebody else, but somebody that gives you a little bit counter, information rather than you just following through on your own. So these are, I think, 3 important ideas.
Okay. So that's wonderful, Prasad. I wanted, curious to know, do you work with individual investors? Have you sorry.
Thank you. We actually work with pretty large, asset management companies, MFDs, CRM system providers. We actually work with IFAs or IAs, individual advisors, on a selective basis, just because the cost of client acquisition is a lot for us and then managing too many relationships. But of course, if people want to get in touch with me, they can email me at prasad.ramani@syntoniq.com, and then we'll be happy to help them out in whatever way we can.
Okay. So thanks a lot, Prasad, for being with us.
Thank you, Prem. Thank you for having me, Prem. This has been a fantastic experience. I am really impressed with the way that you've conducted this virtual conference. It's really, really good. Mind blowing, actually. Thanks to you and your team.
Thank you. Thank you, Prasad.